Hello, you're watching World News on TVP World live from Warsaw. My name is Sasha Farbach. The United States has hit Russia's major oil companies with sanctions to pressure Moscow into agreeing to a peace deal over the war in Ukraine.
The U.S. Treasury Department said Russia's two largest oil companies, Rosneft and Lukoil, were targeted in a bid to damage Moscow's ability to fund its war machine. It's the first time President Donald Trump's administration has imposed sanctions on Moscow over its war against Ukraine. The new sanctions were unveiled a day after plans for a summit between Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin fell apart.
U.S. President Donald Trump on Wednesday said he canceled a summit with Vladimir Putin due to a lack of progress in negotiations. At the same time, Trump announced new sanctions targeting Russian oil exports and a simple message for his Russian counterpart, quote, "It's time to make a deal."
We canceled the meeting with President Putin. It didn't feel right to me. It didn't feel like we were going to get to the place we have to get, so I canceled it. But we'll do it in the future. They're massive sanctions. It's sanctions on oil. The two biggest oil companies, among the biggest in the world, but they're Russian. They do a lot of oil. And hopefully it'll push, hopefully he'll become reasonable, and hopefully Zelensky will be reasonable too. You know, it takes two to tango, as they say. The only thing I can say is every time I speak with Vladimir, I have good conversations, and then they don't go anywhere. They just don't go anywhere. So in that sense, but no, look, he's fighting a war. He's in a war. That's two very competent sides, and that's the way war is. You never know with war, but I would say that it's time to make a deal. A lot of people are dying.
On Wednesday evening, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte hailed Donald Trump's decision to impose sanctions on two Russian oil companies. While being hosted by Trump at the White House, Rutte said that the measures have been put in place to pressure Vladimir Putin into accepting a ceasefire deal based on the current front lines.
What the president is doing today with these sanctions is putting more pressure, of course, on both parties, in this case on Russia. It's all about changing the calculus, making sure that Putin understands that the president's vision this weekend of having a ceasefire, stop where they are, as you literally said, that this has to be step one now. And for him to really accept that vision and to come to the table. And then you have to put pressure, and this is exactly what he did today.
On Wednesday, Russia launched strategic nuclear warfare drills just one day after a proposed summit between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump was put on hold. Vladimir Putin oversaw the drills, which, according to the Kremlin, involved practice launches of ground and submarine-based ballistic missiles. As stated by Russian authorities, the nuclear exercises were planned in advance, and similar drills have been conducted around the same time of year in the past. As part of the exercises, the Russian forces test-fired a Yars intercontinental ballistic missile from the Plesetsk spaceport in the Arkhangelsk region. The missile landed on the Kura test range in the far eastern Kamchatka Peninsula. At the same time, the Russian military also tested another ballistic missile, Sineva. The missile was launched from a nuclear submarine in the Barents Sea. The drills also involved Tu-95 strategic bombers firing long-range cruise missiles. According to the Kremlin, all training objectives were successfully accomplished during the exercises. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said on Wednesday that the U.S. would still like to meet with Russian officials after the U.S. canceled a meeting with Vladimir Putin. Rubio's comments from Joint Base Andrews came just after the United States imposed sanctions on two Russian oil companies.
Well, we'd still like to meet with the Russians. We still want to, and I think I had a good call with Foreign Minister Lavrov, and we'll follow up on that. We're always going to be interested in engaging if there's an opportunity to achieve peace. I think the president has said repeatedly for a number of months now that at some point he will have to do something if we don't make progress on the peace deal. Today was the day he decided to do something.
EU countries on Thursday formally adopted a 19th package of sanctions against Russia for its war against Ukraine. It comes as the bloc's leaders gather in Brussels for a European Council meeting. The 27 member states had already approved the package on Wednesday evening after Slovakia dropped its bloc. The measures include a ban on Russian liquefied natural gas imports, which will take effect in 2 stages. Short-term contracts will end after 6 months and long-term contracts from January 1st, 2027. Measures in the package also include a new mechanism to limit the movement of Russian diplomats within the EU. An overnight Russian drone attack wounded 7 and damaged several buildings in Kiev. The drone strike came following a large-scale Russian missile and drone attack across Ukraine, which killed 6 people and wounded at least 44.
Local media reported that a Russian drone hit the roof of a residential building, shattering windows of every structure in the vicinity. Drone debris could also be seen in front of the Kiev Great Choral Synagogue in the Podil neighborhood, after a Russian drone hit a residential building across the street. According to the mayor of Kiev, Vitaly Klitschko, 5 of the injured are currently hospitalized and 2 are receiving outpatient treatment. Furthermore, the head of Kiev City Military Administration, Timur Tkachenko, said that a kindergarten was hit in the attack. He added that 5 cars were also damaged in the neighborhood.
President Vladimir Zelensky and Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson have signed a letter of intent to develop Ukraine's air capabilities.
The agreement, which was signed in Sweden on Wednesday, could see Ukraine buy 150 Gripen fighter jets. The Gripen is a 4th-generation light, single-engine supersonic fighter jet. It is a so-called multi-role fighter aircraft designed for missions such as air-to-air combat, aerial bombing and reconnaissance. Zelensky said Ukraine aimed to receive and start using the Swedish jets next year. Today there is the first document between our countries, which opens the way for Ukraine to receive a serious fleet, a very serious fleet of Swedish-made Gripen fighter jets. And yes, these are very impressive aircraft, strong aviation platforms that allow a wide range of missions to be carried out. Everyone can see what threats this helps us against. Russian strikes against our state have not stopped, and tonight the Russians carried out another massive attack against our energy infrastructure and our cities. Unfortunately, there are fatalities, including 2 children. The youngest child was not even 1 year old. Of course, today we also discussed other key issues, including energy. I briefed on our main needs following the Russian strikes. We talked about reconstruction possibilities and the search for additional funding sources, in particular to ensure we have sufficient gas supplies for this winter. The Russians are deliberately destroying our production, so imports are now crucial for us.
Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has said that Polish authorities are under the influence of war psychosis and want to destroy the 1,000-year-old Polish-Hungarian friendship. Viktor Orban wrote these words on his Facebook page in reply to an earlier post by Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski. Sikorski wrote that he hopes the Ukrainian military will succeed in destroying a pipeline supplying Russian oil to Hungary. The context to this exchange is the Hungarian refusal to phase out Russian energy imports following the invasion of Ukraine. Even after the European Union members agreed to ban Russian gas by 2028 to stop funding the Russian war machine, Hungary threatened legal action against the European Commission. The Icelandic Foreign Minister and the German Defense Minister have signed a bilateral declaration of intent on defense cooperation. The agreement aims to strengthen surveillance and security in the North Atlantic, while at the same time enhancing NATO's defensive capabilities.
The declaration signed in Reykjavik highlights shared priorities in addressing Russian aggression. Its key components include the development of defense policy, joint work on cybersecurity and defense technology, as well as the procurement of technical equipment and training collaboration. According to Iceland's foreign minister, the agreement reinforces the country's core pillars of defense and security, namely its membership in NATO and defense cooperation with the United States.
Polish authorities have confirmed that last week the Polish border guard detained a man wanted by Croatian authorities for war crimes committed during the war in former Yugoslavia. As stated by the spokesman for the district's prosecutor's office in Warsaw, a request has already been sent out to Warsaw's regional court to transfer the suspect into Croatian custody.
The Polish border guards at the Chopin airport detained a Serbian-Canadian citizen who was traveling from Belgrade to Canada with a layover in Warsaw. The person was wanted by Croatian authorities as suspected of carrying out activities during the war in the former Yugoslavia in the early 1990s, i.e. directing certain political positions and taking part in the persecution of the Croatian population against the person. The district court in Warsaw imposed a temporary detention for 7 days after obtaining the necessary documentation from Croatian authorities. On October 21st, a request was made for his surrender under the EAW procedure and for the continuation of the temporary detention.
High-level Dutch intelligence officers say the country is limiting intel it provides to the United States. Meanwhile, NATO experts confirm that this is happening across the board as trust in the U.S. falls apart. How could this shift potentially affect both Europe and the United States? Is this a sign of a rift in defense and security cooperation? And can both sides involved afford these ties to loosen? Randy Potts reports on the latest.
Dutch intelligence services say they are sharing less information with the United States and instead working more closely with European partners. That's according to two Dutch intelligence officials, Civilian Intelligence Chief Eric Akkerboom and Military Intelligence Director Peter Resnick, in an interview this week. Both officials said the new caution toward intelligence sharing with Washington is linked to what they described as an increasingly autocratic course of U.S. President Donald Trump. The directors say this is the first time political developments in the U.S. are directly affecting Dutch intelligence ties, marking a break from decades of close cooperation with the CIA and NSA.
The U.S. is no longer a trusted partner. Yeah? And arguably, it is the trust amongst allies, which is the spirit and soul of the alliance. Yeah? So why is that? Clearly with Trump, if you wish, the Pax Americana and the US-led global order, as we have known it for decades, are vanishing. Yeah?
And it's not just the Dutch who are getting transatlantic cold feet. After decades of mistrust, spies all across Europe are beginning to work more closely, thanks to the Trump administration. The push for deeper intelligence cooperation accelerated sharply after the Trump administration abruptly halted the sharing of battlefield intelligence with Kiev last March, as well as J.D. Vance's speech in Munich last February.
As President Trump has made abundantly clear, he believes that our European friends must play a bigger role in the future of this continent.
Many European officials fear that transatlantic forums, including the NATO alliance, have already become less reliable platforms to share intelligence.
There is a sense that there could be less commitment on the part of the United States in the months to come in sharing the intelligence they have, both inside NATO and at large.
Former Finnish President Sauli Niinisto called last year for the EU to create a CIA-style agency coordinated from Brussels. Slowly but surely, Brussels is building up its own intelligence community. For instance, intelligence liaison officers now exist in most permanent representations of EU member countries in Brussels. In their recent meeting with U.S. generals, both U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth and Trump said they wanted the U.S. military to focus on domestic threats.
This is going to be a big thing for the people in this room, because it's the enemy from within, and we have to handle it before it gets out of control. We should use some of these dangerous cities as training grounds for our military.
On the bright side, as Washington's military might focuses inward, we may see an opening for a rejuvenated, European-focused defensive alliance. For TVP World, Randy Potts.
A Chinese influencer who promotes Polish culture online has amused internet users with her heartfelt reaction to tasting a classic Polish dish, gołąbki. The influencer is known for delighting her social media fans with her authentic reactions and committed exploration of Polish cuisine. Wei Yishao, a Chinese influencer studying in Poland, recently documented her first experience trying gołąbki, a traditional Polish dish appreciated across the country. To the amusement of some of her 22,000 followers, Wei Yishao used chopsticks and a knife when she first tried the dish. The influencer's followers were particularly delighted when she admitted she bought the classic Polish staple from the store and ate it cold, sparking a flood of advice and invitations to try it warm. Gołąbki, or stuffed cabbage rolls, are a traditional Polish dish made by wrapping cabbage leaves around a filling of rice and minced meat, usually served with a tomato or mushroom sauce. And with that bit of appetizer, we conclude this World News session, but of course stay with us right here on TVP World for more news and commentary.